Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me. Today we're going to be diving into a truly fascinating blueprint, the Global Internal Audit Standards. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth should I care about internal auditing? Well, think about some of the most massive corporate collapses in history, or even just a time when a brand you completely trusted seemed to just implode overnight. Usually those failures happen because a company's internal systems of trust and verification completely broke down. If you've ever wondered exactly how massive, complex organizations maintain that trust, how they verify their own operations, and actually hold themselves accountable behind closed doors to prevent those absolute disasters, well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to break down the highly specific global framework that makes true corporate accountability possible.
It's genuinely fascinating to look at handwritten, deeply human notes like these. At first glance, it's literally just a simple, straightforward summary jotted down on a regular piece of lined paper. Yet the concepts summarized on this single page represent a deeply serious, highly structured corporate blueprint. These notes actually outline the massive global standards used to govern internal auditing across the entire business world. And what I find really compelling here is that contrast. It's a perfect reminder that even the most incredibly complex organizational structures, the very frameworks that keep multi-billion-dollar companies honest, they always start with simple, clear, and foundational ideas. So here's our roadmap for today. 1, the blueprint of trust. 2, purpose and professional ethics. 3, governing the auditors. 4, managing the audit function. And finally, 5, performing the actual audit. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, the blueprint of trust. Okay, so our source notes kick things off with domain I, purpose of internal auditing. Think of this domain as the absolute overarching umbrella for everything else we're going to discuss in this explainer. The purpose is the very first thing that an organization absolutely must define. And why does this matter so much? Because an audit team without a clearly defined purpose is essentially like a referee showing up to a championship game without actually knowing the rules of the sport. They might run around blowing a whistle, but they aren't actually helping the game function fairly. Establishing this core purpose, defining exactly what the auditors are there to protect and improve, is step 1 in building a functional ecosystem of accountability. Without it, you really just have a group of people randomly asking questions without any real strategic direction. Section 2, purpose and professional ethics. Right, so here is where the framework transitions from that abstract purpose to the actual human element. Domain 2 covers ethics and professionalism, and it's built on 5 foundational principles. Principle 1, demonstrate integrity. Principle 2, maintain objectivity. Principle 3, demonstrate competency. Principle 4, exercise due professional care. And Principle 5, maintain confidentiality. Now, reading through a list of ethics might sound a bit dry, but what's really fascinating here is how these principles practically apply to a person's reliability. Let's unpack just one of these. Principle 4, exercise due professional care. What does that actually mean out in the real world? It means an auditor can't just casually glance at a spreadsheet, see that the math loosely adds up, and call it a day, right? Due professional care requires them to actively look for the hidden cracks. It means having the professional skepticism to dig deeper when something looks just a little too perfect. Before an auditor can truly evaluate a company's operations, they have to be incredibly disciplined themselves. They need the competency to know exactly what they're looking at, the relentless care to look at it thoroughly, the integrity to report it honestly, and the absolute discipline to keep that highly sensitive information strictly confidential. But all this talk about personal ethics brings up a really crucial, practical question, doesn't it? How do we actually ensure these human auditors remain objective and protected? It's super easy to tell someone to have unwavering integrity and be perfectly objective, but it's a whole lot harder to maintain that objectivity when the person you're investigating happens to be the exact same person who signs your paycheck or approves your vacation time. Section 3, governing the auditors. So, Domain 3 introduces governance, containing Principles 6, 7, and 8. Principle 6 states the function must be authorized by the board. Principle 7 dictates it must be positioned independently, and Principle 8 requires it to be overseen by the board. Let's break this down really clearly, because this is where the real structural protection happens. To put it simply, the board of directors represents the owners or the shareholders of a company, while management, the CEO, the executives, they're the ones running the day-to-day operations. If an auditor reports directly to the CEO, well, they can't effectively audit the CEO's decisions without fear of being fired. So, to protect the auditor's objectivity, this standard requires them to bypass regular management entirely. They answer straight to the board. This structural bypass is the ultimate organizational safeguard against retaliation. I've got to say, I think this illustrates a completely brilliant dynamic. positioned independently versus overseen by the board. At first glance, those might sound a bit contradictory. Like, how can you be independent if you're constantly being overseen? But they're actually perfectly complementary. Principle 7, being positioned independently, means the auditors are completely free from internal corporate pressure and daily meddling from the management teams they're actually auditing. But independence isn't isolation. They can't just go rogue. Principle 8 ensures they're still held strictly accountable through heavy oversight by the board of directors. It turns out, true organizational independence actually requires strong, high-level oversight to function properly. Section 4, managing the audit function. Under Domain IV, we move from that high-level governance to the actual strategic management of the audit team itself, covering Principles 9 through 12. Principle 9, plan strategically. Principle 10, manage resources. Principle 11, communicate effectively. And Principle 12, enhance quality. If Domain 3 was the protective roof over our house, Domain IV is the interior frame. This is how the internal audit function is managed day in and day out. Think about Principle 11, communicating effectively. You could have the most brilliant auditors in the world who find a massive, fundamental flaw in how the company handles its inventory. But if that audit team doesn't know how to translate that highly technical data into a language the executives actually understand, that massive problem goes completely unfixed. You need a strategy, you must manage your budget, you have to communicate clearly, and you constantly need to enhance the quality of your own team's work. Visualizing this as a continuous circle really hits the nail on the head. Look at how Principles 9 through 12 interact. These aren't just sequential steps that you do one after the other and finish. They are simultaneous pillars of a well-oiled management machine. You could have the greatest strategic planning in the corporate world, but if your resource management crumbles and you run out of budget mid-audit, the whole function collapses. If you communicate well but the quality of your actual auditing is poor, well, you're just confidently sharing bad data. All 4 of these pillars absolutely must remain constantly active and balanced to keep the audit function running properly. Section 5, performing the actual audit. All right, Domain V covers performing internal audit services. This is where the boots finally hit the ground, giving us our final 3 principles, which function as a strict chronological process. First up, Principle 13, plan engagement effectively. You have to know the exact scope of what you're going to audit before you start pulling files. Second, Principle 14, conduct engagement work. This is the digging, the verifying, the classic auditing itself. But I really want to focus on Principle 15, communicate engagement, result, and monitor action plans. This is a huge takeaway. An auditor doesn't just find a problem, drop a report on a desk, and walk away. No way. They communicate the result, and then they actively monitor the action plan designed to fix it. This completely changes the perception of an internal auditor. They aren't just corporate whistleblowers, they are actual accountability enforcers who track the fix right through to completion. It's a perfectly logical progression from planning to execution to vital long-term monitoring. So when we take a step back and view this from a bird's-eye perspective, it's actually surprisingly elegant. Corporate bureaucracy gets a really bad reputation for being messy, but what we see here is a masterpiece of organizational design. 5 domains containing exactly 15 principles, and together they create one complete functioning ecosystem of accountability. It flows perfectly, from the overarching purpose of the function down to the personal ethics of the individual auditor, up to the high-level governance of the board, through the daily management of the team, and finally right into the step-by-step performance of the audit itself. All 15 principles interlock like precision gears to protect an organization from the inside out. Which leaves us with this final thought for today's explainer. I want you to look at the structures and organizations in your own life. Whether you run a business yourself, lead a small team, or just work within a large corporate system, are your organization's internal gears of trust turning smoothly? Are the people evaluating your work truly objective? Is there proper high-level oversight to actually protect them? And maybe, most importantly, when problems are found, is there actual follow-through to monitor the fix? Understanding this global framework gives you an incredibly powerful new lens to see exactly where trust comes from in a business and exactly where it might be breaking down. Thank you so much for exploring this highly structured world of accountability with me today. Keep asking great questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.